CruzArmor in the house today. Actually just doing a quick training video on installing these full rear fender kits. We have obviously the shorter kit, which is the easiest one to install from the seat mount bolt back to the license plate holder, but we have also a kit that runs all the way up with a hole cut in the center, which is a little more difficult. So I wanted to show you how to do that. So I want to make sure everything's good and clean, obviously. Using alcohol spray to clean any waxes you might have, oils, waxes. You want to make sure everything's good and clean too. All the surrounding area, you don't want any dust migrating in, dust or debris. So make sure your lid's down in beside the fender here. Make sure everything's good and clean. I also keep a towel over the seat after I remove the seat. That's kind of dusty, so I have a wet towel under there as well. And then one of the other key places is around this little mount bolt. You want to make sure and really clean that, rinse it. A lot of dust can hang out there, dirt, and while you're installing the thing, the stuff can again migrate out and get under your film. So you want to just make sure that that thing is completely clean and good to go. Obviously you want to make sure your hands are clean. I use a lint roller on my clothes, especially on a black bike like this. You don't want any dust, debris, hairs, fuzz, anything getting up under there. So once everything's good and cleaned, I use the alcohol mix again to clean up that area. Then you want your soap slip solution as well. So I'll go ahead and hit it once with that. Make sure everything feels good. Make sure you're not feeling anything in the paint. So that's good. Just the wetter the better. You can't use too much of the spray liquid, the soap. Also on your piece, your kit piece, you want to make sure that thing's good and soaked up. The top, first off, and then as you peel it, you want to spray as you're lifting the film. So you want to keep all this stuff really good and wet. You don't want a dry piece of film hanging out in the wind like fly paper. So keep that really good, really rinsed. I'm really hitting it hard too. Don't just mist it, I mean get it wet. And then again, hit this one more time in case anything is settled while you were moving around. Kind of wash it down. And then I'm gonna hit this one last time before we lay it on here. So we're gonna start everything right here at this hole. Get your squeegee. What I'll do is hit this just with a little bit of alcohol in the center there, not much, just enough to lock it down. You just want everything kind of lined up back here, everything's centered so you don't have it twisted one way or the other. And then just slowly start squeegeeing around that little hole. You want to anchor it down right here. You want to use overlapping strokes always so that you don't leave an area that is unsqueegeed. So that looks good. I'm even going to take a little of the alcohol mixer just right here under the edges, just a little bit, so that I can squeegee those out and down, and those will be locked as well. So if you can imagine, we're kind of building a little lock strip across here. Okay. So that looks pretty good. It's not moving. So now what we can do is stretch everything away from this point. So we want everything soaked up. I'm going to lift it and put a little more soap under here. But before lifting it, you want to make sure these edges are wet so that when you lift it, you don't suck in any debris or dirt or dust under there. So just keep everything good and wet again. Okay, now I soaked that. Now I'm going to take the alcohol mix and just barely, I mean, I'm not even lifting this an inch. Just like a half inch back there. And now what I'm gonna do is, as I stretch this, I'm actually even gonna spray a little alcohol on top just so when my hand goes on there, my hand won't slip. But as you see, when I start to stretch it back, all these little fingers disappear. So that's really all we're gonna do. We're gonna stretch this back. Put a little more alcohol down here. So what that alcohol is gonna do is make that adhesive lock down back here. Like that, okay? So now that's locked down. Now what I do is, what'll happen as when we pull it here, we'll get a little stretch mark. So we're gonna ignore that for a minute, and we're gonna come up front, kind of the same process. We're gonna soap the edges so nothing gets in there. Get some soap up underneath. Take the alcohol the tip, and then stretch out these fingers. Okay, so now that's all the way across, anchored on both ends in the middle. Now again, when we stretched, we get a little stretch mark here. So at this point, what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna lift that center back up to relieve those stretch areas of the stretch. So again, we wanna make it nice and soapy. Make sure we're spraying here good. There we go. Okay, got some soap back under there. Put some soap back under this side. Okay, now it's released again. So now it's a matter of just squeegeeing out everything. So we're gonna start here in the middle. Coming back that center, and as you see, if it wants to lift up a little alcohol right there. Lock that back down. Okay. If you see anything, I see there's a teeny little speck here of something that migrated in, so we're just going to lift it back, wash it out. And again, this is all with soap, other than these little areas at each end and that little bit that I'm putting there at the hole. That was a little alcohol, just to make sure it's not coming up. But again, if everything else is soapy, we can just chase out the soap. You can start in here, this is a wall here, and now you have a kind of a wall here, so you don't want to run anything down through this wall. It won't go, you'll back up against it. So again, using overlapping, so you're starting down in where it's anchored, so you don't leave any liquid there at the edge. We're just coming up, and then again, we're kind of coming this way. And where they meet, I'm just gently kind of separating it. You don't want to really push hard and leave a line of your squeegee. And then it's just a matter of running everything out to the edge there. And you want to keep this top film good and wet. For once, you can see where you're going with your squeegee, where you've been. And then also to keep your squeegee sliding smoothly. And these little fingers, no big deal, we're going to deal with them here in a second, but let's get most of this liquid out. Actually, I have that yellow one. You probably have this black squeegee, it doesn't matter. This one actually slides even a little better on the contours. The yellow one, the reason you do not have one of them is that can scar the material if you're not careful and you run along a curved edge, because it's really hard. And, but this is the one you'll be using, which is actually a better choice on there. So now on this end, same thing. It's anchored back here. We're gonna come forward. And from the center, we're gonna run kind of back where they meet. We're gonna go each way. Again, keep hitting it with that soap. Now out to the edge. And out to that edge. And I'm putting a pretty, I don't know if you can see how much it's bending there, but I'm putting some pretty good pressure on there. You don't want to just hit it lightly, because again, what you'll do is you'll leave liquid underneath the film. Which some liquid is okay. It's going to have some little bit of moisture under there, which will dissipate out after a few days if you end up with a little fogging or a couple little liquid patches. But if they have any air in them, and you can see any white bubbles, you really need to lift it. And again, lifting it, if you ever have to lift it, just spray it. As long as you haven't used alcohol out here, you can just spray it and lift it. It lifts up nice. Re-hit it with some soap. And then re-squeegee it down. So again, once that alcohol's on, it's kind of, you know, that's the lockdown. And that being said, if we had to lift this rear end for any reason and lift it, you just want to lift back into the soap. Like kind of what we did here in the beginning, where there was alcohol, we locked this down first. As long as we lifted all that up and got soap under it, it kind of deletes the alcohol effect and you can go right back to soap. So now what we're gonna do is, these little fingers, how to get rid of them. We use the alcohol, just barely spray. You don't wanna lift much. I just kind of run this whole little edge, just lifting it like a 1/4 inch even. Just a little alcohol down there. And what that'll do is wash out the soap and make that adhesive on the back of the film tacky again, so it will tack back down. And when you get these things, you just want to start in the middle of it and kind of divide it and conquer it. So it basically splits it into multiple little fingers, at which point they will lay right down. A little more alcohol, that's fine. Any of those final little ones, what we're gonna do is just use a towel here in a sec and use a towel like a squeegee to just dry those out. Because all it's doing is moisture is trying to seep back up underneath the film. So this side's pretty much all done. Now we'll alcohol on this side, just again, that little edge. Running it all the way down. And that is pretty much it. Now what we'll do is just dry it off. And again, kind of use this as a squeegee. You don't want to go up against the film this way, you want to run it this way. Yeah, because if you come up against the film this way, you could lift it and the fuzz, little yellow fuzz could get stuck in the adhesive and then you're having to clean some of that out. So. Again, any of this little fogginess is going to disappear here probably in the next 15-20 minutes, but depending how warm it is out. And even now, as I'm looking, it's like, oh, there's a little speck of dirt right there on one little piece. So what I'm gonna do is soap it, come back to that spot, wash it out. If you get something that's really giving you a hard time and doesn't want to come out, what you can do is use the back of your black squeegee even, which you don't want to use a fingernail if at all possible, but you can literally lay the film back and keep it wet and use the squeegee to kind of wipe out whatever debris is right there. Again, make sure to wash it good. The stuff doesn't just move somewhere else in there. Let it rest for a second. Wherever you lifted it back to, another thing you can do is if you, instead of running directly against where you lifted it, kind of go perpendicular to it on the first squeegee, and then you can go this way. And now I'm going to, again, hit that little alcohol just to lock down that edge. And that, my friend, is a protected rear fender. CruzArmor.